What can be known with certainty? This isn't a question we often find ourselves asking. We tell ourselves that we know when we wake the sun will have risen, that the concrete sidewalks we walk on will be hard and sturdy. We do not feel the need to retest this knowledge each day. We know from past experience how the external world will act when interacted with. But how do we know for certain that things are as they appear? Or if they're even real? Perhaps we are being deceived without realising it. This is the position that 17th century philosopher and mathematician René Descartes found himself in. But this idea can be traced back much further. We must go back to ancient Greece and to Plato's allegory of the cave, which is found in his book The Republic. You may be familiar with this tale. Slaves locked in a cave since birth, only ever having seen the same viewpoint consisting of a wall in a cave. They do not know of the external world. There are candles situated behind them that cast shadows onto the wall. From time to time, people and sometimes animals walk past and cast shadows onto the walls. The slaves identify and often name these objects and believe they are looking at the actual entities. One day, a slave is freed and is taken outside of the cave. While disorientated, their eyes begin to adjust to the sun and light and see that the shadows he thought were real were actually just a reflection of the real world. Once adjusted, the slave hurries back to his fellow prisoners in the cave and tries to explain to them that the shadows they have been looking at their entire lives were not real. This is met with anger and disbelief. They reject this claim and believe the freed slave to have gone crazy. At this point, the allegory should start to sound familiar. Where have you heard this story before? This is, of course, most famously shown in The Matrix, but we can find similar ideas in The Truman Show or even Blade Runner. Plato himself used this as an analogy to explain what it is like to be a philosopher, attempting to educate the masses. Unfortunately, ignorance really is bliss, and people will often become hostile to being told their worldview isn't what they believed. Fast forward to the 17th century, and returning to Descartes. He wanted to make sure that he wasn't being fooled like the slaves in Plato's cave, fooled into believing the existence of a world that was based on a lie. He had considered this doubt for a long time, and admits at the beginning of the Meditations that I waited until I had attained an age so mature that I could not hope that at any later date I should be better fitted to execute my design. Descartes realised that he had hitherto accepted that the truths he knew were all learnt either from or through the senses. This is of course relating to our eyesight, hearing, taste, touch and smell. The problem with this is that Descartes identified that these senses sometimes prove to be deceptive. He states it is wiser not to trust entirely to anything by which we have once been deceived. It is not hard for any of us to think of a time our senses have deceived us. From phantom phone vibrations in your pocket to phantom limb sensation among amputees. Illusions we stare at but our brains can't make sense of. Sounds of footsteps that are no more than a creaky house. To be deceived by any single one of these throws doubt on knowing with absolute certainty anything we obtain via the senses. Descartes doesn't stop at the senses, however. Instead, he calls into question our body's need for sleep, which in turn results in dreams. These dreams are further deceiving, and he states that he sees no indications by which we may clearly distinguish wakefulness from sleep. Descartes contemplates that regardless of any distrust in our senses, or being deceived during sleep, there are truths that can be known with certainty. He describes, whether I am awake or asleep, 2 and 3 together always form 5, and the square can never have more than 4 sides. Yet even this falls into doubt for Descartes, who writes of the possibility there is a powerful deceiver, such as God, or even an evil genius, capable of deceiving him every time he adds up 2 and 3, or counts the sides of a square. So at this point, Descartes has established doubt with the unreliability of the senses, the possibility of being asleep, as well as the possibility of there being a great deceiver. So where does this leave us? For Descartes, well, this was his goal, to find out what we can know for certain, given all these possibilities of doubt. It comes down to questioning what we are, once we strip away everything that can be deceived. In Meditation 2, Descartes writes, "I consider that I possess no senses. I imagine that body, figure, extension, movement, and place are all but fictions of my mind." To doubt the external world is to doubt how we experience the external world, which is through our senses. In turn, to doubt the senses is to doubt our bodies, in which the senses are inherent to. Descartes uses the power of reduction to get to that one thing that is certain and indubitable. He again summarises what he believes himself to be, which is a man with a body that senses. But he also admits that he has had dreams where he has sensed things that he had not actually experienced at all. This leaves the attribute of thought. He states that thought is an attribute that belongs to me. It alone cannot be separated from me. I am, I exist, that is certain. Here Descartes has found something that exists with certainty, his thoughts, which must come from the existence of a thinker. He concludes that, "I am, however, a real thing and really exist. But what thing? I have answered, a thing that thinks." What is a thing that thinks though? Descartes declares it is a thing which doubts, understands, affirms, denies, wills, refuses, which also imagines and feels. We are all thinking things. For Descartes, this is what is known with certainty once we strip back life from our first-person perspective. Sitting next to the fire, we can imagine Descartes breathing a sigh of relief before whispering to himself, "I think, therefore I am."